Japan is an island by the sea filled with volcanoes and it's beautiful.
I think it was just like the last video. It takes like 5 seconds. And we all of a sudden have this kind of strange chord structure that's just like, whoa, what is going on? Okay, so right out of the gate, what we're starting with is a device that Bill uses very, very, very often, and that is chromatic movement in what you might call a locked chord position. So if I'm moving chromatically with a locked chord, it could be like this. Basically, it's the exact same chord, and all I'm doing is I'm moving every single note in the chord up by a half step at a time. Very often, Bill will use sort of like a version of this, where maybe the chord moves, the melody can kind of do whatever it wants, and that's what we see with the first two chords in this case. So the melody is beautiful, and we hear some wacky harmony going on underneath. So what's actually happening there? Well, as far as I can tell, it sounds like the first two chords are identical, but locked and moving up chromatically like this. It's the same chord, and all you need to do is stack the melody on top of that. Beautiful. And that creates a really interesting movement where the chord moves up, but the melody moves down. Watch this. Beautiful. So we start out with beauty, and then on full, we have this C suspended type sound, where it's kind of like a... And it happens that these chords are pretty beautiful. So this is a thing that you're gonna see throughout this video, where the actual context of the musical device matches the context of the narrative, whatever that may be. And that's a really, really thoughtful way to compose music for something like this.
And they stole China's alphabet and wrote a book about themselves. And then they made lots...
Wait, that was such a long scale that just ended, nope. Where you did not expect it to end. I don't know why I find that so funny. It's so stupid. It's just like, okay, so there's a D flat major scale, but for some reason the first octave, it's a D flat Lydian scale, which means, it's, so that 4 is sharp, right? So, but then it sounds like the rest of it is normal D flat, but we're climbing this D flat major scale, if we're just not gonna count that first octave. It just lands on B major out of nowhere, which is super interesting when you consider that he's saying they stole the alphabet and wrote a book about themselves. Like, it's kind of an unexpected ending to that statement, and thus we have an unexpected ending to that scale.
A rich hipster named Kukai is bored with modern Buddhism, visits China, and learns a better version, which is more spiritual. Comes back,
spiritual. I think it's some variation of something like this. Bill uses a lot of cluster voicings, and basically what cluster voicings are, it's sort of the opposite of super wide spaced out voicings. So you might consider something like this to be a lot more spaced out. That's a really, really wide, spaced out voicing of like a C major 7 sharp 11 sound. A cluster voicing of a C major 7 sharp 11 would basically be this. All the notes are clustered together. Makes complete sense. So Bill uses a lot of cluster voicings in some of these little accompaniment pieces.
Hire a samurai.
Okay, so I can hear two things. I can hear the bass line following the melody line. Except here, I'm hearing it drop down to like this E sort of sound. And I can also hear an inner voice movement, and that inner voice movement goes... So when you combine the two, you get...
Hire a samurai.
Hire a samurai. That's what I'm hearing, and it's very difficult to determine what else might be in there. It could be... It could be something like that. Either way, the objective of this is to have sort of like a foreshadowing, kind of foreboding sound, which is exactly what we see it used as, because now it's going to go from hire a samurai to sort of explaining how that process in the history of Japan began to introduce some complications with two different governments conflicting with each other, etc., etc. So the usage of some sort of dissonant, minor-ish, kind of chaotic sounding chords aids to progressing the narrative forward.
Then the emperor overthrows the shogunate. Then the shogunate overthrows him back and moves to Kyoto.
Okay, This is a really great one. This is perhaps one of the best and most simple examples of call and response that I've seen. And here's what I'm talking about.
Then the emperor overthrows the shogunate.
Okay, right there. And the emperor overthrows the shogunate. We have a C major scale from 1 through 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Then
the shogunate overthrows him back and
he goes and overthrows the shogunate, and the shogunate overthrows him back. So we have this call and response. However, this is a classic thing that happens with young jazz musicians in particular. You'll hear somebody play something in their solo while they're improvising. I don't know, maybe something like... And then somebody else in the band will hear that and they'll be like,
oh no.
Hey, I heard that, I'm listening, we're interacting, and that's a great start, and it's generally where, as a young musician, like, that's the first thing you think of, and it's totally reasonable, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, except that there kind of is. Call and response is not mimicry. It's not, I say, hey, how are you? And you look back at me and say, hey, how are you? That's not how conversations work. Generally, I would toss you an idea, and you'll think about that idea, you'll interpret that idea, and you'll come up with a response all on your own, and you will say something back. Now, here's the thing. That response is going to have something to do with what I told you. So if I walk up and say, hey, how are you? You're not going to be like, well, the last time I saw Jeffrey Epstein, he was, we're not going to go down that road. You're generally going to say something a little bit more related to the conversation. And that's what we see here. With the introduction of the emperor overthrowing the shogunate, we have...
Then the emperor overthrows the shogunate.
But in response, the shogunate overthrowing the emperor back is not simply the opposite response of that scale. Instead, we get this.
Then the shogunate overthrows him back and...
We now move keys. And we have this D flat major scale that goes from 5 down to 1, and then I think I heard a little blip of C there. So we have the call and the response. Call and response isn't mimicry, it is the suggestion of an idea and then the response to that idea, which is going to be something different, but still related. That's a great lesson.
Now there's more art.
Ooh, that's a good one. Again, with the cluster voicings, Bill uses some really lush voicings here. I think it's basically like a really elaborated F minor 7 voicing, just maybe with like almost every note. Moving up to G. And then this one is the only kind of outlier here. I'm kind of hearing it as like a suspended voicing, maybe stacked fourths of some kind before releasing to this A flat major 7 voicing that lands on art.
Like painting with less colors, collaborative poetry, plays, monkey fun, tea parties, gardening, architecture, flowers. It's time for...
Okay, this is a device. There's a spot in History of the Entire World also that he uses it. And it's really, really neat. And what it is we're talking about all these different subject matters that are being maybe in development over the course of a number of years. Whatever it may be, it's bouncing around from subject to subject to subject. And to accompany that, the sounds, the chords are completely unrelated, but even more so, the voices that he uses. Maybe it's an electric piano, maybe it's a piano, maybe it's more of a synthesizer, the horn line or something like that, but they all jump around and they're unrelated to each other. And it would almost be like as if I was talking about many different things that are not related. It's a really clever way to kind of give your brain something to think about in the moment, because you're not thinking about the fact that those chords are jumping around from place to place to place. You're just hearing it, and you're hearing what he's saying, and you're going, oh yeah, there's all kinds of different things going on.
Books were published. There's poetry, plays, sexy times, puppet shows, and dungeons.
Whoa! Wait a second. Okay, hold up. We gotta find out what that is, because that is so sick.
Books were published. There's poetry, plays, sexy times, puppet shows, and Dutch studies.
I think the chord structure there, we're going from G major 7, dropping down to G flat major 7, but now going up to like an A flat major 7, and then resolving. That to me sounds like an E flat chord. Super cool. Anyways, there is so much more that we could kind of take apart in this video, but there are so many cool little nuggets of harmonic information in here that we can learn from, and in particular, the way that they are applied to the context of the video, to whatever the narrative is at any given moment. It's an incredible skill that clearly Bill has developed over years and years, and it just takes a ton of practice to be able to utilize harmony that freely. And that's it. That's gonna do it for me today. Bill Wurtz is awesome. We should talk about this more. Let me know about other things that you'd like me to cover. I'd be happy to do so. Please hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.